end the sanctuary cities that have resulted in so many needless deaths. Cities that refuse to cooperate with federal authorities will not receive taxpayer dollars, and we will work with Congress to pass legislation to protect those jurisdictions that do assist federal authorities.
Welcome back to AM Joy. Last August, Donald Trump promised to end sanctuary cities, U.S. cities that adopt a variety of policies protecting certain undocumented immigrants from deportation. Trump hasn't said if he would follow through with his plan, whatever that might entail since the election, but mayors of some sanctuary cities are already pushing back.
To be clear about what Chicago is, it always will be a sanctuary city. To all those who are, after Tuesday's election, very nervous, is filled with anxiety, has been spoken to, you are safe in Chicago. You are secure in Chicago, and you are supported in Chicago.
We are not going to sacrifice 500,000 people who live amongst us, who are part of our community, whose family members and loved ones happen to be people, in many cases, who are either permanent residents or citizens. We're not going to tear families apart. So we will do everything we know how to do to resist that.
Local authorities could refuse to comply with Trump and risk billions of dollars in federal funding. Meanwhile, some Democratic lawmakers want President Obama to act first and protect the most vulnerable immigrants who came out of the shadows under the protection of his executive orders. This week, a group of Democrats, including Illinois Congressman Luis Gutierrez, called on President Obama to pardon some 750,000 Dreamers, young immigrants who have already applied for deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA. Joining me now, Maria Teresa Kumar of Voto Latino, National Republican consultant Caton Dawson, Michelle Bernard of the Bernard Center for Women, Politics, and Public Policy, and Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post. All right, let's talk about this. Maria Teresa, I'm going to come to you first. I want you all to listen to Luis Gutierrez talking about this idea of President Obama essentially pardoning all of the people who came out of the shadows through DACA under his protection. Take a listen.
This group has already been vetted by the federal government. Remember, we're talking about people who came forward, paid hundreds of dollars, and were vetted, provided their fingerprints, and the government said, go. You are good people. They are more at risk because they registered.
And NBCnews.com posted an article, Maria Teresa, on whether President Obama actually has the power to do this. According to an unnamed White House official, the president's clemency power wouldn't allow him to give legal status to any undocumented individual. However, this is a congressman named Zoe Lofgren, said that lawmakers were only seeking the pardon of the immigration violation, entering the country illegally or overstaying a visa, not legal status or work permit of immigration status, meaning just the part about entering the country without documents. Maria Teresa, is this something that Voto Latino, that you would like to see done, and do you think the president is likely to do it?
Well, I think that we have to be very cautious because these individuals came forward. They were young people. They basically came here before they were 16 years old through no fault of their own. They came out of the shadows so that they can work, so that they can actually help their families and continue their education. They are upstanding citizens and have actually demonstrated that they've given billions of dollars back into their communities. The challenge, though, for the administration, I've had conversations with the administration, is whether or not they can blanket this because, again, the administration does not have the power to provide legal status. Only Congress can when it comes to immigration laws. So it's very, very tough. And I think that right now they are definitely at a challenge. But when you start talking about this idea that Donald Trump is going to go after cities that provide sanctuary protection, he doesn't understand that. And in 2014, an Oregon federal court ruled that actually practicing that, making that a connection between ICE and local law enforcement is actually unconstitutional. And as a result, you're putting a lot of these cities in a quagmire. And it's unconstitutional, Joy, because what happens is that when the person is being held, they're held indefinitely, oftentimes without legal protection. And in cases, they've discovered that even U.S. citizens have been held indefinitely against their will until they can actually find whether or not this person is documented or not.
Yeah, and Michelle Bernard, Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, and it's interesting because Harry Siegel, a colleague of mine who writes for the Daily Beast, wrote in the Daily News that you're now seeing mayors who are going to become sort of the front line of the resistance to Donald Trump on some of these policies. This is what Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York had to say about making police do just what Maria Teresa was talking about, making police officers into immigration enforcers. Take a listen.
New York City already cooperates fully with the immigration authorities regarding anyone who's committed a series of substantial crimes, anything involving violence, terrorism, major drug offenses. What we are concerned about, there are some very petty crimes, nonviolent crimes, where I think this becomes a more complicated issue. Because what we do not want to do is be in the business of our police forces being effectively immigration enforcers. And talk to police chiefs around the country, they'll tell you this. Once people believe in the community that the police are there to effectively be immigration agents, the police lose their bond with a huge number of people in this country.
Michelle, there's already difficulties around the country in a lot of these big cities between the police and communities of color. What would it add to that if you now have police being forced to essentially round up, Donald Trump has said, 2 to 3 million people around the country?
Well, I would say it's fairly safe to argue that we've already reached a tipping point in terms of the animus that we see between the police and many people of color in communities across the country. And the problem with a prospective Donald Trump administration saying that they're going to ratchet down and really force, quote unquote, sanctuary cities to deal with illegal immigration is that it is a backdoor way of sanctioning at the local and state level all kinds of discriminatory policies. It's very similar to the show me your paper laws that we've seen in, for example, Arizona, and it states all over the country. If police officers are told that they must go after illegal immigrants, how do you define someone who is an illegal immigrant? Do you walk up to people who are brown and say, show me your papers, prove to me that you're a U.S. citizen, prove to me that you belong here? That is racial profiling, and it is completely illegal, and it would destroy, I believe, the sort of reputation of police officers all over the country, not to mention that this is not a state function. And the definition of sanctuary city is really, it's very unclear. Some places are not sanctuary cities because of any sort of political leanings, but just out of a matter of practicality. Do police officers want to be put in a position, for example, where they lock someone up under a detainer coming from ICE, only to find out that they have locked someone up improperly, they are sued, and then the federal government doesn't indemnify them for illegally holding someone in their jails?
And Joy, can I just add to that? One of the things that we're finding too is that overwhelmingly 67% of the Latino community is they believe deeply in law enforcement. Conversely, though, 68% of them are afraid of racial profiling. When you all of a sudden connect the dots between ICE agents and police officers, there is increased violence that just goes unreported. Individuals are not going to be able to communicate willingly with the police if they know that someone in their household all of a sudden can be deported, whether it's domestic violence, whether someone gets robbed. These communities all of a sudden become incredibly vulnerable, not only inside their home, but outside, recognizing that these folks will basically keep their mouth shut because they won't call the police.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, not only that, but this would be sort of a sneaky Jennifer Rubin backdoor way of defunding some major Democratic-run cities. You've got cities like New York, Los Angeles, Santa Fe, Chicago. This, in a theory, would be a way for a Trump administration to strip potentially billions of dollars from cities that are run by Democrats, which I can only imagine the loss in funding could create even more problems, exacerbate problems with maybe housing and crime by taking vital funds away from those cities potentially. Talk a little bit about the politics of what the optics of this would look like, Jennifer Rubin. If you do have mass arrest, if you have the NYPD and the LAPD, which LAPD said they won't do it, being forced to go in and pretend to be ICE agents and sort of play immigration agent, what does that do politically to the Republican Party, Jennifer?
Well, first of all, the Republican Party that I knew used to be in favor of the Constitution. And the Constitution says that the federal government cannot cannot by overwhelming economic pressure, force the states to do something. That's why the portion of Obamacare regarding Medicaid was struck down. This is just doing the same thing. Republicans were against this when the president was doing it. Now with Donald Trump, they want to do it. Local and state officials have discretion to enforce the laws. They can prioritize, just as we were just talking about. Maybe crime, actual crime, is a higher priority. So I don't think they can legally do this. I think it would create havoc. And you know what? Republicans live in those cities and those states as well. He took Ohio as one of his key states that has Columbus, that has Cleveland, that has a whole bunch of big cities in there. Is he really going to turn around and defund those cities? But I want to make another point. This is nothing but extreme racism. The largest problem we have with illegal immigration is not people who've come over the border. It's people who have overstayed their visas. Many of those people, not all of them, but many from Asia and from other countries. They have to come by air, they have to come by boat to get through the system. Why is he not talking about any of them? This is all focused on Hispanics who have come through the border at one time or another, some of them 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I think it's time for people of good common sense to say, listen, why don't we start where the problem is? The federal government has the names of these people who are on overstayed visas. Why don't they go do something about it if they're so concerned about illegal immigration? I think this is an outrage. I think it's going to be politically a time bomb for them. And quite frankly, I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Well, and many of those are from here in Europe. We're going to play a little later an Irish politician who says about 50,000 from Ireland have overstayed. Right. I want to play for you, Caton, the person who could be the next Attorney General of the United States. And to Jennifer's point, the focus is not on the Irish who've overstayed or Europeans who've overstayed. It is very specifically targeted toward Hispanics. And I want you to tell me what you think this does to a party that is now the party of Trump. This is Jeff Sessions in 2006, a floor speech on immigration.
So fundamentally, almost no one coming from the Dominican Republic to the United States is coming here because they have a provable skill that would benefit us and that would indicate their likely success in our society. They're coming because some other family member of a qualifying relation is here as a citizen or even a green card holder, and that's how they get to come. And then they're creating false documents to show they're these relatives or their spouses, they're married, when it's not so.
I mean, Caton, aside from the fact that apparently he is no fan of Big Papi or many of the other Dominican folks who have come over here and made great strides, not only in baseball, but in the sciences and the arts and business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's thrown them all into this basket of unwantables. What is that kind of rhetoric in the next potential Attorney General of the United States? What does that do to our country, let alone to your party, Caton?
Well, I think you'll hear that these things answered when it comes to hearings and confirmation hearings. At the end of the day, campaign rhetoric now, and Jennifer said it, the Constitution's there. One thing you're going to find that's going to bind the next administration together is I think you'll see fewer executive orders. I think you'll see more of the legislative process for the first 2 years. And again, on both sides, there was a lot of heated rhetoric, rather, the Clinton campaign and the Trump campaign on what they would do as president. But you have to go through a process to get all of this done. You know, one of the things we brought up a little while ago was it is true. Look at the cities where they're sanctuary cities, and they're predominantly Democratic cities. You know, I think if we've learned anything from the bridge scandal in New Jersey, that you better be careful how you practice your politics. So I would denote the fact that one of our commentaries said that might have been a political comment. I think what you were seeing out of Donald Trump was a message about sanctuary cities that was landing in rural America, where he mined votes by the tens of thousands of people who thought their circumstances of a rising tide lifts all boats wasn't working.
Why don't you condemn the statements that Senator Sessions made on the floor? That was what the question was, and you didn't answer it. Do you agree with him that these people are not worthwhile? Do you agree that there's some kind of massive conspiracy to get into this country on family connections? Why don't you denounce that?
Do I since you're the comment, do I agree with Jeff Sessions? Jeff Sessions will be able to answer that for himself.
No,
What
I'm
I agree
asking
with
you.
is
Why don't you get out there?
I'd like to add one other point about this because it is, I'm sitting here cringing at the fact that we are ignoring the most important question, which is that this is a question of morality. And when we are talking about morality and character, there should be no discussion about money whatsoever. Is it right or is it wrong? And by just the fact that Donald Trump is considering Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, we're seeing that his rhetoric is going to become public policy.
And what I'm Joy, one last thing.
We have to go.
Okay. One last
Very
thing,
quickly,
though,
Marie, very quickly.
When Donald Trump was elected, all of a sudden, all of the private industry stocks all of a sudden went soaring. When you're talking about undocumented immigrants and this idea that you're going to round them up, you have to understand that it's going to be a big boon for a certain sector of the business, and you have to be suspicious. Follow the money. It's not and as Jennifer was saying, we are actually right now at a crossroads with our morality. Who are we as Americans, and who are we defining as Americans?
Absolutely. Well, Maria Teresa Kumar, that we're going to keep asking that question on this show. Really appreciate you being here. Caton, we're going to give you a break to think about your answer to that question on Jeff Sessions, because we actually would like to know what you think about him. Caton, Michelle, and Jennifer will be back later in the show. All right.